It's an absolutely spectacular bridge. Those of you who visited it know that there isn't a time in the day or the night where you can't take a picture of it that doesn't come out to be absolutely spectacular. And what's exciting about this bridge is that it doesn't just possess the quality of beauty, it also possesses the quality of strength. This is a bridge that during times of high wind can sway 27 feet from side to side. During times of heavy load with traffic, it can go up or down 16 feet. It's very flexible. And yet it's aesthetically appealing and preserves the natural beauty. This is a bridge that's also very utilitarian. It's got 40 million cars that cross it every year. That's over 100,000 cars every day. In the 75 years of its existence, it has only been closed for about 3 hours due to high winds. It's beautiful. It's structurally sound, it's practical. Yet, if you were standing on this bridge the day that it opened, in 1937, and you were to look eastward, you would see a mere 5 miles away another bridge, one that had opened a mere 6 months prior, just 6 months prior. And that bridge was actually a bigger marvel of engineering than the Golden Gate Bridge. Yet nobody talks about the Oakland-San Francisco Bay Bridge. This is what that bridge looks like. It's actually a bigger marvel of engineering, and it actually was the biggest public works project of any in the entire United States at that point in time. It has not 40 million cars crossing it every year, but 110 million. It's actually bigger than the San Francisco Bridge. It's longer than the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge, and it's higher. Just one pier of this bridge, the Bay Bridge, extends 242 feet below the surface of the water. The underwater part of that one pier has more steel and concrete than the entire Empire State Building, and the underwater part of just that one pier is bigger than the largest of the pyramids in Egypt. And yet, nobody talks about this bridge. For those of you who've actually been to San Francisco, I could bet you that you have pictures of your children standing next to the Golden Gate Bridge, but not next to the Bay Bridge, even though it's a bigger marvel of engineering. Why is that? The reason, I believe, is actually very simple. The makers of this bridge, the Bay Bridge, focused on making a choice. They focused on picking either or. When it came to choosing between strength and structural integrity and aesthetics and beauty, they picked one, not the other. Whereas the builders of the Golden Gate Bridge decided to do both. They, in fact, looked for ways in which strength and beauty, two somewhat diametrically opposed things, could actually be mutually reinforcing and complementary to each other. And that very, very simple approach of not settling for false choices, but in fact looking for the multiplier effect between two somewhat complementary, somewhat divergent things. That very simple approach of doing both A and B rather than A or B, and then looking for the multiplier between those two, that very simple approach is at the heart of what has worked for our company and what I believe certainly can work for many other companies and government organizations as well. Doing both means looking at every opportunity, every situation as an opportunity to seize rather than a sacrifice to endure. And that approach has actually worked quite well for Cisco. What's interesting about that approach is that when we go to management school or engineering school or law school or any kind of professional school, we are told to focus, to prioritize, to pick A versus B, to make choices, because that's what we're trained to do. Yet, when it comes to our own personal lives, outside of work, we follow the doing both approach very easily, very comfortably. For instance, if you were coaching a soccer team, you know that your team's going to win with offense and defense. If you're a gymnast, you know you need strength and flexibility. You know that ecosystems rely on predators and prey. You know that car manufacturers have to have safety and performance. You know that musicians have to have improvisation and practice. And if you're like me, someone who has 3 children, you know that for those children, you want to give them the roots that will keep them grounded and the wings that will help them soar. In our day-to-day lives, we follow the principle of doing both easily and effortlessly, yet when it comes to work, we put on our battle armor and we show up to work and we're ready to make those false choices. I believe that you have to do both. If you're a business, you have to focus on innovation and operational excellence. You have to focus on growth and profitability. In fact, we were talking about the Golden Gate Bridge. About 50 years after the Golden Gate Bridge opened, there was a small little company that opened its doors just about 10 or 15 miles away from the Golden Gate Bridge. And when the founders of that company were looking for a name for their company and a logo for their company, they looked to the city from where they were, and shortening the name of that city gave the company its name. And taking the logo of the San Francisco Bridge gave the company, Cisco Systems, its logo. But what Cisco got from the Golden Gate Bridge wasn't just a logo and a name. It got from the Golden Gate Bridge this approach of doing both, an approach that has actually worked very well for us over the course of the last 7 years. Actually, all of our 25 years, but especially in the last 7 years, it's resulted in us doubling our revenue, tripling our profit, quadrupling our earnings per share, and making Cisco today a company that is generally regarded as quite successful. Those of you who are not aware of what Cisco is, we are a networking company. We're about $40 billion in annual revenue. We have about $40 billion of cash on hand, and generally we generate about $1 billion of profits after all taxes every month. We're also one of the top 14 brands in the world, and are routinely named in the most admired companies list and also best places to work list. In fact, in Turkey, we are the number 4 best place to work. But this approach of doing both has actually worked quite well for Cisco. And what I want to do in my talk today is I want to share some personal experiences at Cisco where I believe this approach applies. In fact, I want to go into 3 areas. I want to use one example in the area of innovation, because that is the theme of this conference, and how Cisco applied the principle of doing both to innovation. I want to talk about a second example, which is in the area of operational excellence, because that is the complementary other half to innovation that enables innovation. And then thirdly, I want to talk about people and organizations that make all of this happen. 3 specific examples, and I'll spend maybe 10 to 15 minutes on each of those and try to give you a flavor of what really happened for our company. And perhaps there are some lessons in there that some of you might find useful and enjoyable.